Right, we're live streaming now, team, and we get going in 30 seconds. As soon as I can write a note in my book to... All right, well, Morena, good morning everyone to the Strategy and Operations Committee meeting for the 21st of October. Welcome to elected members and to staff supporting us today on this paper. Can I just check, because I have come in just right on the button around protocols around masks. So we're all, no public at all throughout the course of the meeting, so we're mask free for the duration. Welcome to those who are viewing via live streaming. I hope you enjoy the meeting. And so I'm just going to move to item number 2, which is the council blessing. And Councillor Halliday, over to you.
As we deliberate on the issues before us, we trust that we will reflect positively on the communities we serve. Let us seek to be effective and just so that with courage, vision and energy we provide positive leadership in the spirit or inner spirit of harmony and compassion.
Thank you, Councillor, and I'm pretty sure that you're not Kirsten, so we may want to just sort the last I knew that you weren't Kirsten as we sort that out. Unless you want to tell us something. So we move now to item number 3, which is apologies, and we've got Councillor Buswell, who is arriving a little bit late this morning, just with some other commitments. And also got apologies from Marilyn Stevens from the Otahanga Community Board, from Councillor Pravanov. And the third one, Tanika, was... and Guy Burns as well, although I note that Kathy is here today. And so we'll just note those apologies. Item number 4, declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda. I'm not aware of any. And so we move to item number 5, which is public speaking time for items relating on the agenda, and as far as I'm aware, there is none. No. And so item number 6A, there is no responses. 6B, any leave of absence? No, don't see any. And item number 6C, matters of an urgent nature, again as chair, none have been brought to my attention. Item number 7, updates, there is none. And so we get on to the meaty part of the agenda, which is the reports, item 8.1, found on page 6. And I'm going to hand it over to Ruth to walk us through this report, and then we'll see if there are any questions. And good morning, Councillor Buswell. Over to you.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. This report seeks approval for the development of the Otahanga landfill site as a resource recovery precinct. It's all outlined in the report, which I will take as read, but we thought we'd give you a little bit of context. So Paul Busey and I went yesterday to the site and captured the site on video using a drone. So we'll show that now. So I'll give, there's no sound on it, I'll give a bit of a running commentary. Tanika, if you can just pause when I say so. There'll just be one place when we get to the transfer station where I'll want to pause briefly, and after that I'll be happy to take questions. Well, we've done a lot of site development. It's our organic program is just steaming ahead there with composting and gardening. Bit of food in there as well if you look closely. Well, yes, so the first part of the site that we're going to see, so I'm not gabbling away while it's running, is from the just behind the green waste public drop-off area and running across the top of the landfill, basically. So this is nominated in the report as the sort of the emergency area. We need to keep the cap clear for a number of reasons. It's continually subsiding. We need to maintain it. There's regulations around what you don't do on a cap, like you don't plant gardens like that. You don't plant trees because they penetrate the cap. allow gas to escape and stormwater to go in. So keeping the cap really up to scratch is an important long-term operational thing that we need to do. So that's what we'll see first, lots of grass across the top of the cap. Hopefully it will start moving soon, because that's not exciting.
So what
But
direction are we looking at?
we are looking from the south. We start at the south end near Waterstone, and we're running down the west side of the site, so you can see the motorway there. And on the left we have the M2PP maintenance yard. We have a stormwater retention pond. And then on the right we'll swing over and you'll see the transfer station. So that's right in the middle of the shot is the main entrance. That's Otaihanga Road. And now we've turned around. That's a public green waste facility that you come to from Otaihanga Road. And now we're heading from there back towards Waterstone. We've got another road goes right through the site on the left. On the left of that again is the Composting New Zealand facility. Oh, pause there, please.
Put the brakes on.
Well, that all went quite a lot quicker than I thought. So that green area on top that I was talking about, so that's the cap, sort of from the left of this shot, right across to the pine trees, really, Waterstone, the wastewater treatment plant. We've just got the closed landfill, and that's all capped off, 85% capped off and grassed. Now we're back, actually this is a different video, but they've all been stitched together. So this video is to run you across the proposed resource recovery area in the imminent future, which is, we've called this Site A, so this is because this is our existing resource recovery site, and then we run across the stormwater pond and we'll come to the maintenance yard, which is Site B, and we're hoping to develop the activity, so we're having lots of conversations and done some concept plans about how we might take our resource recovery from just this site across into the next yard as well. So if you want to just play across there. And we may have internal linkage for internal traffic only, but we have an access way onto Otaihanga Road from that site as well. Oh, and now we're on to the next bit. So we're just running up the west side. This is all sort of our water treatment site as well as the precast yard, and just heading up towards the wastewater treatment plant. So we've got this big swath of land between the west edge of the landfill and the motorway that and then there's some land on the other side as well that's of interest, because our water goes under the motorway and goes over that side as well. We do some we have a number of bores all around, but we have several on the other side of the motorway, also some surface water and some groundwater monitoring. And back to the maintenance yard. Just there's quite a bit of land in there, all. Hopefully one day it'll look like the first shot, not with pretty flowers, but at least with lots of native vegetation.
And no Councillor McKeown can't put houses on it.
No, not even 3-storied ones. So, the probably the most important piece is that shot from the existing transfer station across to the maintenance yard. That's Site A and Site B, where we're going to develop some integrated activity and take the maintenance yard's currently just been a commercial site and going to shift it to a resource recovery site. But as proposed and seeking approval, the idea is to long term, as opportunities arise, to develop the entire site, any available areas, and shift it all to resource recovery. But we're looking at now to 10 or 20 years, just depending on what happens in this space. So, thank you, Tanika. Are there any questions?
All right, team. So, firstly, appreciate the staff putting the time into getting the drone footage. That's really helpful for us to see it other than just a coloured map within the paper, so I appreciate that. Also, just before I forget, noting that Councillor Randall is attending via Zoom, so Bernie, I will come to you once we go around the table to see if there are questions on each of the agenda items, and so I'll try not to forget that you're there and see if you have any questions. So just opening it up to elected members, I can see His Worship the Mayor.
Right. I think it's important to mention the Waste Minimisation Task Force that was formed in 2018 as part of a long-term plan, when the public came and told us that they needed a vision in terms of our increasing ability or responsibility in the waste minimization area. Can I ask staff to give a bigger picture in terms of how this fits, in terms of the outcomes and the recommendations made by the task force, and to put the big picture in terms of the more current or the recent long-term plan, where there was some kerfuffle over the termination of the recycling centre in Waikanae, where we were criticised for undermining this our commitment to recycling in the environment and climate change and the whole gamut. To put it in perspective, so the question that I want to put, can you give me a big picture of what are the big issues that you're dealing with? Because I think this is one item of about 5 recommendations that we're going to tick off today. And what are the other items? Just to put it into perspective.
So in the Waste Minimisation Task Force, there were 4 key actions proposed: step up, Otahanga, food, kaitiaki, and education. So in terms of stepping up, we're doing a lot of regional work on construction and demolition, as well as the ongoing implementation of the bylaw. We're active nationally as well. I'm representing TAs on the Product Stewardship Forum for e-waste. And then we've got lots of talks with parties. So that's taking, being more active in a governance and sort of political space or policy space. The other one was to establish, second key recommendation in the report was to establish a resource recovery facility at Otaihanga. So this approval sort of underpins that to make sure that we can develop that site for resource recovery. And at the moment we've got concept plans, we've got talks underway with contractors. We're doing a lot of work around leases and making sure that we have the flexibility to work in the site. And we've got just having lots of talks with different parties about what that activity might look like. But it will be related at Otaihanga to the better provision of services for the public and sort of future-proofing ourselves, because there is a lot of product stewardship work going on. There's electronics, tyres, refrigerants, agricultural chemicals, plastics. There's potential for a container deposit scheme to arise, and probably some others that I've forgotten. But having more space and better spaces where the public can come and access those drop-off points or facilities to be involved in, more products moving into a circular economy is really important. And probably in this district, having one site for those kinds of activities at Otahanga is really beneficial. In the kaitiaki space, we're doing a lot of work with food. We've got earth starch on the site, so that's an example of us supporting through the waste levy and the sort of use of land, supporting that someone can come on the site and trial, a little business project. So Will Hanson from Earth Starch is working with food composting in a little pilot container, and subject to evaluation, he might wish to increase what that looks like and the services that get provided. And on top of that, we've got a lot of activity in the food and organics, particularly the food waste space, with a big focus on that through the waste levy projects, which are going to come to council shortly for approval. So we have 12 proposed community projects which start to sort of decentralise and allow the community to take responsibility for food waste. On education, we've just increased our FTE from 1.5 for sort of education to 2 full-time permanent employees, so from April. So we're really hoping to engage in the community a lot more. With regard to Waikanai, I kind of want to not sidestep, defer perhaps that conversation, because there's actually another report coming to Council in November all about the waste services, and I believe that question will sit in that report. So this report is really focused about, enabling us to offer all of our community wider resource recovery services through the use of this site.
Thanks, Ruth. And I'm sitting right next to Ruth, and I can see she's got absolutely no notes at all. So what that tells me is she knows her stuff very, very well. And I agree, we've got that report coming as chair. I thought there may be questions around the Waikanai situation, and I agree it's better to wait for that report to come. It's been requested. It'll be informative, and then we'll be able to discuss and debate what the options are there around supporting the rural communities and so forth. So you finished, Your Worship, and then I'll go to Kathy Spears. And now before you ask your question, I've already checked with Sean and it can't be used for a motorsport park. But over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought I would put a smile on Sean's face, actually, and I know the answer to my question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. On page 9, item number 26, community outcome. Our communities are resilient, safe, healthy and connected. Everyone has a sense of belonging and can access the resources and services they need. Now my question is, just wondering, is Council using all of the space out at Otahanga? Because the Kapiti Car Club used to have a site over there, and I'm wondering, is there any space over there where car enthusiasts could meet up, even for driver training, young people as well as older people? We've got older car clubs here. So I'm just wondering, is every inch of that space going to be used up, or could some be used for?
Short answer, no.
You're not using all the space?
No. The short answer to that is yes, we are using all the space. Right. Short answer to your question, can they come on site, is no.
Could I just clarify that part of that issue?
We already have the Kapiti Dog Obedience Club there. We've been working proactively with them, seeking another site. It's an incredibly busy site. Well, firstly, fundamentally, we want to use it for resource recovery. So any other community activity doesn't really meet that purpose. That's what we're asking. Secondly, in terms of a public site, anywhere outside of the transfer station, Composting New Zealand's retail area, all of that site is non-public. And having people on site in an increasingly busy and complex and health and safety conscious business environment is just really not a good idea.
Thanks, Ruth. That was the point that I was coming to. Even if there was land available, it would be potentially a health and safety risk in terms of, or challenge, in terms of getting access and having that activity there. Before I move on to Councillor Hanford, did you have any further questions? I just note your lights out. Councillor Hanford.
Kia ora, thanks, Ruth. The answer that you just gave to that question might actually in part help to answer the question that I had, which is just how close will the community be able to get to this whole process? Because obviously it could be potentially quite an awesome opportunity for education through various types of resource recovery, depending on whether in the future as well, if that's kind of expanded and it's transitioned to be a real kind of a thing that's used by the whole, occupied by the whole site. So I'm just wondering what the opportunities are through the site to be used as education and how close the community can get to that.
Isn't it wonderful to be asked a leading question? Absolutely, yes. So we have our existing transfer station. That's pretty much, rock up, pay for your waste, do a bit of recycling. The space is very restricted and it's a commercial activity. So what we're potentially, conceptually looking for on Site B is a much more community-focused activity, depending on who ends up, running that site, there's lots of opportunities to be involved in, these national product stewardship programs, a space for community groups to be involved in the waste minimisation sector. On a broader scale, obviously this also has climate change implications for hooking people into that activity, because waste is usually, it's your most immediate and first thing that people tend to start with. If you're a business, you look at your waste bin, and if you can do stuff with your waste bin, that's really, that reduces your carbon emissions. So by the same token, establishing, at least in the first instance, waste minimisation activity for the community allows us to hook them in and then offer some broader perspectives on that as well. So that is, I'm working really hard on talking to lots of people and trying to, and we're considering how we might give effect to that sort of community environment.
Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, Ruth. This is absolutely fantastic stuff. And I'm really just building on Councillor Hanford's question and just what you said, and more than likely this will come back in the November report. But so you're really talking about the development of grassroots maybe community projects in that space as well. That could be housed, two or three different initiatives could be housed there with regards to waste minimisation or zero waste or anything like that as well.
Potentially, it does depend on the space allowed and the project, but certainly see some kind of umbrella organisation sort of owning the activity on the site, and being there and being able to facilitate those sort of projects. Whether they actually have enough space to happen on site is another thing. I mean, it looks big, but you start to get, some goods on the ground or some services. You get, 20 people parked there. I went to New Plymouth. They've got this great big shop. Their car park is like the size of a rugby field because they expect that shop to be really popular. And that's one of the constraints with the site, with our existing site, is it's tiny. Even recycling, you've got 6 bays and traffic movements are difficult. So we're just evaluating which activity is best on the other site, how that works, and then we have to do, we have budget this year for planning what that might look like, and that's where you have to take traffic and parking and customer flows, and cool. The space is never as much as it looks.
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
Just before I move to Councillor Elliott, you touched on something there which I raised with Sean in the pre-chair meeting for the strategy and ops around one of the many bits of feedback that came through the Waikanae decision was around the the confusion around access to the Otahanga site for especially those in Waikanae, the elderly, and actually, when you come in, how you get to the actual site to do the transfer and so forth. So the question I said to Sean was, is there an opportunity through this to look at that improved directional signage and sort of access into the thing to make that really clearer?
Oh, definitely. And, there's potential for some activities to shift or stay. We're in the middle of contract, discussions that can't really comment on we've just got conceptual stuff at this stage, can't comment in detail any further because we're just working out what that looks like, really. But definitely how people get in and out of the site is a big part of the design consultation that would need to be done, because you would need to do, there's always a safety and design element.
Okay,
absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, team. It's really exciting for myself and I'm sure for the whole mayoral task force to see this paper come to council. It's really great. And I'm wondering, of course, if this gives us scope for a revamp of the tip shop, which is sort of kind of been the public face of recycling until today.
It's one of the things that is on the current site, so it is, along with everything else on the current site, it's under discussion about where each of those activities best fits, but certainly, there's an opportunity.
Great.
Thank you. It reminds me of the TV show where today, Mr. Mansell, you are Natalia. I can't remember the name of the TV show.
I hope I'm as good looking as Natalia. Hope she's as good looking as I am. Just a couple of questions, probably outside the scope of this paper, but area 5, which is the concrete works, panels and things.
Oh, the precast yard?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I just wonder what sort of timeframes left on their lease. Have they given you any indication when they're out of there? Or?
Yes, 10 years, and that's because we have enough to do in the meantime and enough space to do what we want probably across the next 10 years. We don't see any immediate need for a large activity that would use that space, but should that arise, that's the point of seeking this approval to shift business spaces to resource recovery activity. But it's a big space, and so at the moment there is no activity that we see needing that space, so they'll be there for another 10 years and then it'll be up for review.
Right. Just a second question. Access over the top of the cap, is that an issue? Is that constantly going to be breaking down?
We have a couple of roads, as you saw. So one goes right along the east edge is on closed landfill, but it's quite shallow there, and then the landfill rises up, and there's one access road right across the top that's currently allowing moving of materials and delivery of materials, in fact, to the south end where we're still capping. So that road would stay, and that actually allows us to access sort of each side of the landfill, west and east, for remediation and getting traffic up there. But more importantly, in the event that we ever have an emergency, then that big grass area is has been designated in our debris disposal plan as a temporary emergency disposal area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, the Mayor, and then I don't see any further names.
Two questions. The first one is in terms of the neighbours who live around there. I know of Waterstone area and also the interface between this site and those living heading north on the left side of State Highway, the old State Highway. I know there have been issues. Is this part of the consideration as we increase the activities there, how sensitive the neighbours would be?
I haven't heard since I got here, which is now about a year, anything from the people on the left side of State Highway 1. So that all seems to be, not an issue anymore. When I first arrived, and ongoing, there are some occasional issues now with odour and noise, but we have a community liaison group. We're working really actively with that community. I think we've made a lot of progress, and we're just going to continue to make changes that address any issues. So I think that is in hand, but it's certainly something in terms of anyone applying for a consent for their activity that they need to consider that. But this, what's there is really existing activity, and what we're proposing here is a long way away and is not, at worst, would be an activity similar to the current transfer station, but likely to be less intensive, being slightly more community focused. So in terms of the development of Site A and B, they're a long way from Waterstone and no more effects than sort of current activity on the people on the west of the highway. So,
yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. Second question I had was an update, if you can, on how well the timber recovery project is going in Otaki.
Yes, it's going quite well. They've got now 4 containers on site. Their site pad has been completely finished and all their containers are placed on site. We actually donated the old paint container from Otaihanga, and that just recently got painted Marai red last weekend. It's pretty cool. They're having another working bee this weekend to paint up, and people are really aware that their activity is there. So once they get their containers sorted, they're looking to put up a container cover so they can work a bit more in all weathers on their volunteer days. We expect that activity to pick up, and I think so far they've diverted about 15 tonnes of timber from landfill. which for a small organisation
Yeah.
is, not insignificant. So
Exactly.
it's going very well.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to request that I move the resolution 34, but I think it'll be better if the portfolio holder moves it, and I'll be interested in debating the point.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to check with Councillor Elliott. I also noticed the ghost of Councillor Randall has a question because his light's on. But on that, I just want to check whether Councillor Randall via Zoom has a question before we move to Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I do. So it's addressed to Ruth. Ruth, thank you very much for a quick reply regarding the community's questions around the recycling bins at McLean Park. That was a very good, quick reply. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. Councillor Elliott, you had your light on. It may have been to ask to move the recommendations, but I didn't want to assume that. I just want to check. Thank you. So would you like to move the recommendations found on page, just my computer to come up, and then I assume, Your Worship, the Mayor, you're happy to second?
Yep.
Sorry, take my, here we go. Found on page 10, recommendation 34 moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by His Worship the Mayor. Right of introduction.
Thank you. I would really like to thank the team for your ongoing work on this great new journey that we're all on, doing things better. And to the table, in the 19th of November, Kapiti here are hosting the quarterly regional waste forum, and I would dearly love to have invited you all to attend, but being in this post-COVID situation, there are already 87 attendees expected from around the region at that meeting. Maybe there'll be a facility for Zoom to have a look at some of the work, but yeah, it's a really interesting area to be working in on behalf of the district. So I would like to thank you all and ask you to support recommendation 34.
Thank you, Councillor. So I open that up for debate. Councillor Holborough. Sorry, Your Worship the Mayor.
That's right.
Your light's on. Go, Guru.
First of all, I think what you're seeing here today is the first tick-off of a massive project. And there are more to come. And Ruth, you gave us an outline of the other recommendations that have come from the task force, and you're working on those. Extends the vision of our commitment to recycling and response to climate change and also sustainable living. When you compare the work that the council staff have put into this and their recommendation for doing away with the Waikanai recycling station, you can see that the decision to do that did not come from an unthinking perspective. There has been deep thought been put into this in unfolding a massive plan into the future. But council and council staff in particular took a massive hit around that time. There were issues which council staff could not say because of commercial reasons associated with the expansion of this facility here. That will unfold later, I think, when the report comes back to us in November. So sometimes bear in mind that even though you might be at the helm of that particular portfolio or that particular take, that we don't know everything. That's fine. But know that the staff responsibility has been very deep and committed, and I want to congratulate them for the work that you've done to bring this to this level and looking ahead, and also apologize to you all for the hits that you all took. Having said that, I also want to congratulate the task force members chaired by David Letson, Bill Carter, Natalia and Kirsten from EV, Jackie Elliott was on it, Deirdre Kane from the community, Great Power member, who was that?
Daniel and
Trevor Daniel. Sophie, you on it too? Yeah. Thank you all for the work that you all put into this. That's right, Deirdre Kane. So thank you all for the work that they've done. And I think we should send a note to the task force members and tell them that, look, this is the first takeoff on the project. It will be useful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't see any further lights up. I'm just a quick scan around the room. Go back to Councillor Elliott for a right of reply. It's been waived. So we're going to put that to the vote. Recommendation 34 on page, 34 on page 10. So before I do that, there was nothing from Councillor Randall? Okay, thank you. And so all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, and that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Ruth and Linka and the team for the work that you've done there.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're now going to move to item number 8.2, which is on page 11 of the agenda, and just welcome staff to the table if they're coming up. Or yes. That's Laura and Jason. Laura's scared. She's staying down the back. Morena, Jason.
Morena.
I hand it over to you to walk us through the report.
Tēnā koutou katoa, elected members. I will do this as a tag team effort because I do want to introduce you to Laura, and she does have a microphone and she knows her stuff. And I'd love her to walk you through the detail. But before I do pass to Laura, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of where we're at with the district plan, particularly for those hundreds of people watching this broadcast, I'm sure. So with the district plan, we have now a second generation operative district plan. It has been amended to reflect national planning standards. We've got a pretty modern base to work from, and now with the long-term plan in place and resourcing for a program of plan change work, that's what we're now focused on. So the report that you have to consider today is if you like, the new world that we're moving into. It's a world where we're looking essentially to evolve the district plan in a number of different ways. You're familiar with the fact that there is an urban development plan change program of work which will follow on from the growth strategy. Today's discussion actually is about a different package of work, but it's all related and it's all connected. Growing well is about not just having more housing, that's incredibly important as we all know, but it's also about providing for a range of values in how we grow, and you will see things in this package of plan changes that achieve that and provide the balance that is really important when we do embark on a growth phase in the district. So the report that I'll pass to Laura to walk you through shortly is seeking some recommendations from you, which are not actually statutory recommendations. This isn't a phase where the RMA is telling us we have to seek your advice. Those phases are to come. This phase is really about transparency. It's about ensuring that the community is aware of the full ambit of work that is going on with the district plan, and it's also about making sure, of course, that you're comfortable with us progressing that work and ultimately talking to the community about that work. So it's an important phase. It's not the end of the road when it comes to this work. Phases after this would include coming back to a council and seeking a decision to publicly notify. That's not what the stage is that we're at. We're at an earlier stage with this package of work. That'll be a stage to come. And then following that, there will be subsequent stages which follow hearings and such forth. So this is kind of, if you like, the first time that we pop our heads above the parapets publicly on these topics and say, hey, these are worthwhile things that we're recommending to you we should continue to work on. So that's probably about enough from me from a high level perspective. Can I just pass to Laura now to walk you through the topics? And I wonder, Laura, whether we might actually switch seats so that maybe the members of the public can see. Would that be a good way to?
Entirely up to you two.
Great.
To whatever works.
And she's better looking, mate.
She's a lot better looking, yeah. Thank you.
Welcome, Laura. No pressure now.
No, Morena. Thank you, Jason, I think. Okay, I think I'll just briefly run through the recommendations and list off the plan changes, if that's okay. So today we're asking the committee to endorse the topics of 13 plan changes that we'd like to make to the district plan through Plan Change 1 of our district planning work programme. So to start off, Plan Change 1A is regarding revising accessible parking provisions for new developments in the district. Plan Change 1B, remove liquefaction risk management provisions for new buildings to avoid duplication with upcoming changes to the building code. Plan Change 1C is also to revise cycle parking provisions for new development, and these two parking changes are in relation to the MPSUD, which requires us to remove minimum general parking. So these are the two provisions we are allowed to keep. So we are looking at revising them and updating them. Plan Change 1D is to reclassify Arafata Road and Paraparumu in the transport network hierarchy maps and to fix an error that's been identified on a local community connector route off involving Ventnor Drive and Tūtanakai Street. Plan Change 1E is to review and amend the development incentive provisions guidelines that are in the district plan currently. Plan Change 1F is to revise the modification of Indigenous vegetation provisions to better align with the policy intent. Plan Change 1G to revise plan provisions for new buildings in Wahanga Rima Waitapu sites, again to align better with the policy intent. Plan Change 1H, a new Waitapu listing for Te Rua Tu Paku o Te Rangi Heroa. That is a gravesite in Kapiti Island that was recently listed by Heritage New Zealand. And we want to bring that into the Heritage Register within the Heritage Schedule within the district plan. Plan Change 1I, new Waitapu listing for Kariwariwa Urapa in Waikanae Beach. And this is to align with the findings of a recent Waitangi Tribunal report dated May 2020. And again, to bring this into the heritage schedule of the district plan. Plan Change 1J, amend area of the existing Takamore Waitapu area to align with Heritage New Zealand's revised review of the registration extent that they recently changed. Plan Change 1K, to amend signage provisions to align with the election advertisement requirements of national regulations to keep consistency with our district plan and the electoral regulations. Plan Change 1L, to rezone 14 council-owned sites from general residential zone to open space and recreation to reflect their open space character, and also to reassign 2 council-owned sites from natural open space to open space zone recreation to better reflect their use. And finally, Plan Change 1M, to update plan provisions to remove duplication with any bylaws that are amended in this year. Those two being the Keeping of Animals bylaw and the Traffic bylaw that's currently up for review. So, if the committee is comfortable in endorsing these, we will then need to make the committee aware that we will seek to undertake consultation in the preparation and drafting of any amended plan provisions. We'll also take further assessment of any changes that we would seek to come back to the committee with at a later date. Any content that we do determine will need to change, a plan change, we will come back to the committee prior to notification, and that will occur in early 2022. So as Jason explained, at this stage we're not seeking any formal approval, but just endorsement of the plan topics and approval to undertake consultation with mainly affected landowners and any other parties or stakeholders we consider would have an interest in these particular topics.
Excellent, thanks very much, Laura. And so the list, the alphabet soup, is on page 21 of recommendations. I see I've got a question from Councillor McCann, and then if anyone else is Worship the Mayor next.
I'd hate to dispel the idea that district-wide councillors actually do any work, but I'll ask some questions and note that it shouldn't affect that idea. On page 11.8, monitoring of the district plan via users and a review of the issues, I just note that we haven't cited that. Is there any possibility that, and I'm assuming that we haven't cited that at any point?
Sorry, what was the reference?
So on page 11, number 8, paragraph number 8, monitoring of the district plan via users, there's been a review of issues that's taken place. I realise that's quite an operational view, but is there an ability for councillors with a specific interest in this area to view that work or not?
I suppose it's a package of, it's a constant feedback monitoring loop that we have through our consents team, through building consent officers, through customer feedback. So there's been no report done. We talk to our compliance monitoring officers as well, and when issues are raised, be it through council officers or the public who have an issue, we generally note it down and keep an active register. So we have an active log of the issues, and we keep track of it. We do an assessment periodically through these omnibus plan changes to try and bring prioritise the most urgent ones first.
So so the answer is.
Well, we have a register. I'm sure it would be available if councillors wanted to.
Yep, thank you very much.
View them.
And I've got a number of questions. Is that all right, Mr. Chair? Thank you for that. Page 12, plan change 1C with car parking, and I know that this is obviously something that is somewhat out of our control. How can we confirm that we are having negotiations or discussions with the regional authorities around public transport? Because while we're taking away the option of potentially having car parks, that means people rely on public transport, which we don't have a direct say in. How are we trying to make sure that we are bringing the regional council to the table to talk to your teams?
Yeah, so I think we're just acknowledging this is a piece of the puzzle. It's a big puzzle. There's lots of different factors that go into this. So we're working with our own transport experts from the infrastructure team, and they are aware that this is one piece of it. It's on them to actually pursue any further conversations around public transport, but we're very aware it's an issue.
To see that, Sean Mellon wants to respond.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so we certainly have raised the issue with Greater Wellington Regional Council a number of times, that we feel there needs to be a more focused approach on Kapiti related issues in terms of public transport rather than, as well as the regional approach, but and raised it through Metlink and raised it through the manager there. So we're putting more effort into it, but it does require, I think, a bit more focus and a bit more effort from Greater Wellington to look at some of these issues, because obviously with the regional growth framework, the focus through the NPS UDC in terms of the changes that are proposed there, and with further changes recently announced, a good public transport system is critical to the functionality of all of that. So it is a really key issue for us, and we certainly would like to see more involvement with Greater Wellington Regional Council on the ground here in Kapiti, looking at what those issues might look like and how we might deal with them moving forward.
Just before you go to your next question, so I don't forget, Your Worship, an invitation was extended out to our regional councillor to meet with this council. I recall a month or so ago we haven't had any.
I think the COVID thing got in the way. We should re-trigger it. I will do that.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor McCann.
Sorry, for the benefit of the audience, people who are listening, they wouldn't have been able to hear the Mayor's response to your question.
The question to His Worship was an invitation was extended to Penny Gaylor, our regional councillor, given that we haven't seen her this triennium, and to raise questions around some of these matters with Greater Wellington Regional Council around things like public transport. And His Worship's response was that COVID got in the way of the recent request, and that he will reissue the request for the councillor to make an effort to attend a council meeting with councillors.
Thank you, that's very thorough. The next item I'd like to ask a question on is on page 15, number 31, establishing a stakeholder group, which I think is a fantastic idea, and I realise that work is ongoing. How are you picking which stakeholders you're going to work with? Because I'm aware that from time to time developers do have issues with councils, and are you avoiding the ones that perhaps have issues, or are you trying to have a really wide range of people with different ideas?
Well, we haven't actually established the group yet, so the composition of any stakeholder working group is still up for grabs, but I agree, the wider range of interests, the better. We'd be hoping to include developers where we could.
I'm just also aware that that if there isn't a process put in place and if it isn't visible, then we run the risk of saying that we're cherry picking from people we want to hear from. How can we be sure that that perception doesn't occur in the public?
Well, we know some people have expressed a keen interest in this, and they're from a variety of fields. We also want to work with other councils, such as the Regional Council, around some biodiversity provisions. We've got other people we've learnt from through a recent proposed district plan appeals process. We know key people that have an interest, and definitely has a range of views. I would say I'd be pretty confident we could get a balanced view across this, but also be aware we will be coming back to this committee in a matter of a few months to give you feedback on that, and we'll obviously give you an idea of who we've spoken to, so hopefully we can satisfy at the time that we've done the due diligence on it and we've got a good range of views.
Yeah, in no way through the chair am I suggesting we aren't, but there's just the perception that we have to go those extra steps further sometime. Number 32, if I may, Mr. Chair. This is mentioned in this report, but isn't actually part of this work, and I know it's a separate piece of work to provide options on incentives to enable support social housing and affordable housing. How is that piece of work progressing, if I'm allowed to ask that question?
Jason? Sorry, I think, yeah, Jason.
Go on, happy to take that one. Coming through.
You might need to
No, Bella. Look at Bella. No, Bella.
If everyone could push the buttons if they're currently...
Which...
That sounds better. Oh, very good. So probably just a little bit of context about these guidelines. They are, while they're titled Development Incentive Guidelines, actually their policy intent is probably a bit narrower than that title might suggest. They hark back to a day where I guess the council of the day wasn't trying to incentivise social housing or affordable housing through these guidelines. They were actually trying to incentivise some gains in terms of energy efficiency and biodiversity improvements. And the way that they're worded, they really are pretty much only applicable to rural zones, just by their construct. And so they've had a very narrow focus, and it's with that focus in mind that we are reviewing them. That's not to say that there isn't space in our forward work program to look at the very incentives that I know, Councillor, you're interested in. It's just that this isn't the home for that work. When we come back to you and talk about the scope of urban development plan changes, and I say that plural because it's going to take more than one to really hit all of the points that I think Council will want us to hit. But it'll be in the context of that scope about urban development plan change conversations that we can start to explore when that topic might be able to be addressed.
Thank you. And I see, sorry, excuse me, Natasha.
Do I need to turn mine off?
Thank you. And if I could just add to that, I think our experience and why the existing incentive guidelines are in this Omnibus plan change is why we want to make sure in terms of that future piece of work, we're actually taking the time to really think it through, which is why we haven't tried to do anything on that as part of this piece of work, this bill.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for those answers. I did note the question noted it's not part of this work, and it was just trying to get an idea of where we're at with that piece of work, and when we'll get some reporting back on that. Could I get a clarification on where we're at with that piece of work and when Council would expect to see some of those options?
Can I ask for that update to come offline to all councillors just via email, if that's okay? I think so that we can, given that it isn't a major piece of this paper, then at least we get the update that you're looking for, and then we can move through, because I know there's a number of other. Have you got any further questions? Councillor, I think it was Councillor Elliott. If anyone can push their buttons again, I think Councillor Compton and his worship were there.
Oh, certainly. Do you want to go first?
Councillor, you've got the light, so you go and keep things moving.
Okay, my question is referring to change IJ, and that is the Waihatapu changes. So specifically, the Karererera, I'm trying to get that absolutely right, Karererera, Urapa report. So I'm just noting that in the information that we've received, there are a number of maps and figures. So there's generally the one from the Waitangi Tribunal Report 2020. There are the archive maps from Horowhenua County collection, and the things that Mary O'Keefe has provided. But there are no maps actually showing in the report of the New Zealand Historical Places Trust map or the change that is proposed. So I'm just wondering if the more maps will be provided when this goes to public consultation, given it's quite a topical and emotive subject, especially for residents and of course our iwi, our whakarangatai iwi.
Yeah, and we're not there yet. So yeah, we're very aware this is we're at the start of the process, and we are working with iwi to start thinking about that, what those maps could look like, and also what sort of classification in terms of the Waihatapu. We have different classifications within the district plan, but it's very early days. That's why we're here saying, should we endorse this topic and take it forward? And obviously there will, once maps are agreed and there's been discussions around what that could look like, there will be consultation quite extensively, I imagine, in this respect with landowners as well.
Okay.
And that would all occur prior to public notification.
Okay, lovely. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you guys for the work you've done on this report. That particular part of this report is going on my history bookshelf, which, thank you. It's really wonderful work.
Thank you. Your Worship, the Mayor.
Yeah, it's on the same topic, 1I. I'm a little intrigued. The report from the tribunal, pre-publication report, is addressed to 4 ministers, asking for an amendment to the legislation. So am I to assume that the tribunal's findings or recommendations on this particular matter has empowered us to make this change? Or is the recommendation to cover future possibilities?
So the recommendations were really for Heritage New Zealand in that report. The value to us is the cultural evidence that's the Waitangi Tribunal has noted, and they also noted that there was a lack of heritage protection, and I think we agreed that certainly is the case in terms of the district plan. I think the recommendations were more towards Heritage New Zealand and their process, and also potential changes to the legislation that they operate under. But
Right.
the value of that report is really the cultural values and the evidence that an urupā is occurring, well, it exists in that site.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just respond with the allowance. Councillor Elliott's comment that she's going to put this historical document on a shelf. I think every councillor needs to read this because the engagement of iwi in this area is getting more and more. This is just the earliest report yet on the Waitangi Tribunal's deliberations on Ngāti Tiatiawa's area, Rohe. There's more to come. And I would suggest that councillors need to start doing their homework. This is not the past that should be left in the past. This is the past that's going to be the present and the future. Just
Thank you. Noted. Councillor Compton and then Councillor Buswell.
Thank you. Through the chair, 3 questions. Well, hopefully only 3 questions from me. We obviously have that hard deadline of February 2022 for notifying the removal of minimum car parking requirements. So how does the rest of the timeline fit into reaching that end point in terms of consulting? I don't know, do we need to have hearings on that sort of initial consultation phase and then notifying? So how does the next 4 months leading up to when we have to publicly notify that change work?
Yeah, so the February 2022 deadline, we are looking at that for notification of all the plan changes if we can. There's 13 now. It's getting quite big. It wasn't that big originally. So there's going to be a lot of work undertaken. We're going to have to do some evaluation. We're going to have to look at cost benefits. We're going to have to look at some talking to landowners, some early consultation, and potential drafting of plan provisions if we think it's required. So there is a lot of work to do. But at the moment, yeah, early 2022 is our target for that notification date of all plan changes. If we need to, we may look at separating some out, but I'm hopeful we can do it.
So in terms of any consultation that's going to take place, are we looking at it happening this side of Christmas or early in the new year?
We will definitely be starting this side of Christmas. We have to.
Cool. My next question was on page 18, point 57, it references the existing open space strategy, but obviously we're out consulting on an updated open space strategy. So how does that fit in with the timing of this? Because we obviously don't want to end up with a situation where first plan change might end up being inconsistent with that new strategy.
Yeah, so the strategy is really informing some of the open space requirements around zoning. So I guess the main link between the open space zone and what the strategy might be is that there is a expectation that I think residential properties within the district can access open space within 400 metres. So that's in the current strategy, and it's also carried through into the proposed strategy as well. I can't determine what the end result will be with the new revised strategy, but the fact that it's in there for consultation purposes, we'll keep an eye on what the feedback is around that. But that's the main link. From a district plan point of view, we're just mainly looking at the use of the land and the recreation side of the parks and some of the changes we're proposing. I can't see it impacting on what the strategy overall will be. These are changes that have occurred through development, and if in any way we're sort of catching up and fixing a few sites. Whilst I think the open space strategy is more looking forward.
Cool. And lucky last, and obviously this week we had the big announcement from the government in terms of them effectively wanting to standardise residential dwellings and all that stuff. Now obviously there's the transport hierarchy stuff in here that would have an impact in terms of requiring if you're going to have car parking, or if someone wants to provide car parking on the side, that they'll have to be able to turn the vehicle around entirely on the side. But then a lot of, presumably, those sites that are going to be impacted by this new central government change is going to override that, presumably? Or is that something we work through over the next few weeks as we figure out the impacts of what that legislation is in terms of that zoning and where the hierarchy of these sit within the RMA?
Definitely still thinking about it, but I suppose the district plan is saying you don't have to provide car parking, but if you want to, as part of your development, if you see that as a good thing to do, then we want you to be able to turn your vehicle on site.
So I guess the question there is, do we end up being inconsistent with what the government's proposed this week, or is that something we'll figure out as we go through the next few weeks?
We'll figure out, but I think it's around options and people's choice as to whether they provide it.
Cool. Perfect.
Councillor Buswell.
I just wanted some clarification around the changes to McLean Park. When we did the management plan, there was 3 set precincts, and they were all doing different functions within the whole park. So this park change, or the zone change, is it going to be split up, or is it going to change the entire park?
To be determined. Like I said, we're still at the start of all of these processes, but I think we'll definitely take the management plan into account. We've also got to take into account that there is still some sand dunes within the park boundary, which may well be worth retaining in terms of the existing zoning. We may do a split view. We've still got a lot of work to do on this.
Okay.
But yeah, we're not able to give you an answer yet.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Holborough.
Thank you. So I'm just looking at the cycle parking, page 12, paragraphs 15 and 16, and just wondering about our town centre revocation works and the timing of this in terms of those, because they're going to be very crucial areas in terms of providing cycle parking with the cycle network provisions that go along with them. Vaughan might be able to comment.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, the question there was more, because I guess we would be looking at potentially providing more than any minimum requirement for cycle parking as part of the town centre works, regardless of what's proposed, I guess, in terms of changes. Was that the... Okay.
All right, I don't see any further questions on the screen. I'm quick scan around. Councillor Halliday.
So just building on that, sorry, Mr. Chair, will there be any gap with that cycling for when what the government's proposed has to happen, and we would like to see happen with cycling? Is there going to be a gap where we can't influence that at all?
So are you in regard to developers' proposals coming through without provision for...
Which covers cycling, cycle parks as well. We're wanting to add cycle back in there, provision for that. Will there be a gap between the timeframes for that happening at all? Where we...
I can see Jason's putting his hand up, so...
Thank you. Oh, I'm good. It's possible that there might be. What we're looking to do with, if I look sort of more broadly at accessible parking and cycle parking together for a moment, what we're looking to do with accessible parking is to go to the Environment Court and say, this is a really important issue and we think that plan change should have immediate legal effect. And there are obvious reasons why accessible car parking is an incredibly important thing to make sure gets provided for, and there is no gap. Now, the court typically needs to be convinced of these things. So you need a strong argument, and we think that there is a strong argument for accessible parking. We think it would be a harder road to hoe on cycle parking. So we're not proposing to go to the Environment Court and seek immediate legal effect for that part. So what would happen is that part would have legal effect after notification. Now, how long after notification will depend on what happens. If we don't get any submissions in opposition, it could have legal effect quite quickly. If we do get submissions in opposition and that therefore translates into a conversation that goes through the hearing, then those provisions might not have legal effect until such time as the report from the hearings panel is received and hopefully endorsed by council. So we can't be absolutely specific about how long that gap might be. Of course, developers in the interim will be able to, if they choose, provide cycle parking. So what we're talking about here is the gap that may exist about when they absolutely have to and how much they have to.
Thanks, Jason. Look, I think that's the end of questions. I've had a wink from Councillor McCann of sorts that he'd like to move the recommendations. Councillor Elliott has indicated that she's happy to second that. So moved by Councillor McCann, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Right of introduction, and then we'll open up for debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep this very brief because we've all been sitting around this table for days. Laura and the team and Jason and everyone, the questions I think that are coming to you from councillors show how interested we are in the subject, and they're not meant to be criticisms in any way. There's just so much change in this space that one of my major concerns is, do we have the staffing levels and support to be able to work through all of this, and what will the government come up with tomorrow to change your plans? What early Christmas present might they have in the housing space? Hopefully it's funding. But yeah, I'd like to, sorry, the CE is choking.
The chief executive needs some help over here.
I think this is a really, really difficult space where there are so many moving parts, and I know I've said that before, and I commend the way our council is trying to bring it all together in a way that makes sense for both councillors to make decisions and then be able to consult on it. So I do hope that whatever the government does come up with next assists you in that, and I'd like to definitely recommend that we support these omnibus changes.
Councillor Elliott?
Thank you. I concur with Councillor McCann's comments there, absolutely. And I would just like to once again congratulate you on this report. It's very exciting, and would like to see possibly a copy of this bound and put away for councillor reference. That's actually so important, and it's the start of a long journey as far as Waitangi Tribunal findings.
If we could just pause there for a minute, Tamika. I forgot to check whether Councillor Randall had any questions. I'm sure you would have told me if his hand was up.
It's going now.
Councillor Randall, I can't hear you. Is your volume up?
No questions. Thank you. Thank you, Bernie. Just thought I'd check. We'll come to the voting in a minute. I've got a little bit that I wanted to say. I can't see any other names up on the screen. Although it's not directly related to this, Laura, I think a comment that you made was that there were many pieces to the puzzle, and absolutely understand that. And I'm going to keep saying this through the different papers and briefings and workshops around the disconnect between the work that we're doing and Greater Wellington Regional Council. So I've raised it through the Regional Growth Framework. We've got our Grow Well document out there. There's been comment today about the significant lack of investment around public transport. We've got the government making changes by the week around some of these matters that affect us directly. Our Grow Well document went out this week, and already my community are asking me questions about, that's great, but where's the public transport? So my worry is that, you know, often when you have missing pieces of the puzzle, you can find them. In our instance, some of those pieces sit in things like our long-term plan in year 2 or 3. Some of these pieces don't even feature in some of the other organisations. So, for example, improve public transport connections through to Otaki. And there is the hybrid train option there for Otaki. Again, to remind you all, even if that tender was signed today, you would not see those for 5 years. And so we see rapid growth around our transport nodes in Otaki, for example. There isn't the facilities or infrastructure to service that. And so I just wanted to raise that concern through debate, as I will again and again as we have different plans and stuff come forward. And it's not a criticism of this organisation, but actually the ones that are, I get criticised sometimes weekly about the lack of services. And when I look at it, they're not actually services that are a responsibility of Kapiti Coast District Council. It's Greater Wellington, it's central government, and so forth. So I just, excuse me why I raised that, but I think it's relevant to this topic as it will be to others as we move forward. So with that, I don't see any further lights lit up, so I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, and that is carried. Can I just remind, there was a takeaway from that around an email going out in terms of the development incentives work. Thank you, team. I'm going to take a short break because I think we've had a good crack at it through 2 of the agenda items. And if we could be back in at 11 a.m. for the continuation of the meeting.